welcome to Brain Chat. I'm Dr. Mitzi Joy Williams, your board certified neurologist and MS specialist, and my mission is to engage, educate, and empower those affected by MS to become an active part of their healthcare team. Here on Brain Chat, we'll be discussing all things MS, health and wellness, advocacy, and we'll even throw a little bit of music and music therapy in there as well. Thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned for the next episode. Hello, friends. Happy Monday and welcome to Brain Chat. I'm Dr. Mitzi, your board certified neurologist and MS doc, and I am so excited to be back with you all tonight with one of my super friends, Mindy Eisenberg. And also, Brain Chat wants to welcome one of our new sponsors. We do have sponsors. We want to welcome Biogen IDEC as our new sponsor. And also, for more information about our other sponsor, Janssen, you can go to more2ms.com. All right, very good. So you guys know how we do on Brain Chat. Log in, type in the comments, tell me where you all are logging in from. I bid you greetings from Atlanta, Georgia, which is muggy and a little rainy, but certainly not as warm as it was over the weekend. So happy for a little bit of reprieve from that. And very excited to be back with you all after a couple of weeks off to talk about a topic that I think is extremely important. And as Mindy and I were kind of briefly discussing before the program, we got a lot of ways that we can go and talking about imbalance, right? So, one of the things that we think about when we think about physical symptoms of MS, we know we have physical symptoms, but we also have invisible symptoms, right? So we have things that are very easy for people to grasp, as disabling, and certainly difficulty walking is one of those. But oftentimes when people think about difficulty walking, they think about weakness and they may not necessarily think about imbalance. And so I think it's something really important to talk about. And I think that also in thinking about imbalance, we can think about imbalance in terms of walking as well as imbalance in terms of our emotions. I mean, there are lots of things that can be imbalanced, not just for people living with MS, but for all of us in general. So I think there's a lot for us to learn, and I'm looking forward to an amazing discussion with Mindy Eisenberg, who is the founder of Yoga Moves MS. She is no stranger to Brain Chat, and I'm going to bring you in the stream, Mindy, so we can get the party started.
Yay.
Hello.
So good to be here with you.
Absolutely. It is absolutely my pleasure to have you back on Brain Chat and talk about, a topic that I think is really important, but also, to spend some focus on yoga, which is something that I talk to my patients about constantly, almost at every visit. I advise people to, start a yoga program, and I talk about the benefits of yoga. So I am super excited, even about some of the things that we discussed briefly before the program to get into. And I see there are a couple of people logging in from Detroit. I see Maryland.
Oh, yeah.
You guys keep typing in the comments, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So Mindy, you've been on the show before, but I always ask all of my guests to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into working with MS.
Sure. So I was a hospital administrator after I graduated and transitioned. Once I had my kids, I transitioned to playing with yoga and doing it myself, and then realized that I wanted to teach it. And that was about 10 years later. So I got a lot of practice in. And I think someone out there knew that I was supposed to be doing this. My mother had primary progressive MS. So I lived with someone who had the body kept, progressing. There was nothing out there like there is now. And I venture to say there were no doctors like you out there at the time. I don't know how many specialists were even. I don't remember my mother having an MS specialist. She probably had a neurologist. I remember the PTs afraid, the physical therapist afraid, told her not to move, it would make it worse. Now we know that that's so different. And
absolutely.
When you talk about balance, one of the memories I have is how well we got to know the fire department because we had guests in our house.
Right.
And so as a little girl, I remember, trying to help her, and we got kind of good graceful at falling down. And then either a neighbor or somebody would have to come over and help.
Wow.
So,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah.
And so, in thinking about imbalance, that is certainly one of the consequences that can be, in some cases very devastating, for people who have chronic conditions like MS, certainly falling, you can run the risk of breaking something. Also, there are cases if you live by yourself where you don't have anyone that can come and help you immediately, so, one of the big reasons we certainly want to treat imbalance is because we want people mobile and able to move around, but we also don't want them falling down and hurting themselves
No.
or being stuck somewhere for extended periods of time.
And what we find is, as you say that, when people are concerned about their balance and their safety, it seems to make it worse.
Mm.
So that's one of the reasons. I know we haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So before we get into, the nooks and crannies, let's just kind of take a 50,000-foot view and talk about what is imbalance, right? So when I think about imbalance, I think about, people who, difficulty walking. A lot of my patients say they feel like they're veering to one side,
Mhm.
like they look like they're drunk. That's often how people describe it. But there are a couple different things that help us to be able to be balanced. So certainly vision helps us being able to see where we're going. Also our inner ear, can help us. And those who've ever had, vertigo or things like that know that if their inner ear is off, that balance is going to be off. And then something else that helps us is our ability to kind of know where we are in space, or something called proprioception. So being able to feel. So if I have people who have numbness or tingling or lack of sensation in their feet, their balance can also be off as well. And then, of course, there's damage to certain parts of the brain, like the back of the brain called the cerebellum, which can cause something called ataxia, where people are just kind of off balance and either veering to one side or just can't, be able to walk a straight line. So, what do you think of, or what are the most common things that you hear from people when they talk about imbalance?
I think they talk about how one side feels weaker than the other.
Hmm.
People who have foot drop talk about that. Um, I do hear some dizziness.
Hmm.
When they talk about balance, there's usually frustration.
Hmm.
And what I see when they walk in the room is, well, this is sometimes they're using a cane or a walker, and sometimes it'll be like, where is your cane or your walker?
Right.
Oh,
Right.
it's in the car in case I need it.
So how's it going to help us in the car, in the trunk?
I don't know. It's magic. No,
Right.
actually, I've made the cane now is a yoga prop.
Mm.
We'll slap them when they come to the
Nice. To make sure you bring it inside with you, or make sure that it's close
absolutely.
to you
Yeah,
when you need
absolutely.
it.
When I do it, well, what's a little bit different, like from yoga and yoga therapy, is we do a little bit of an intake or an assessment just to ask people, find out where they're at. And one of the questions that's really telling for a yoga teacher is, do you use assistance to ambulate?
Mm.
That immediately tells us, what kind of environment they're going to need, or props, or how to approach certain poses, really our whole practice.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about, what is the difference between yoga and yoga therapy? Is there a difference? Are they the same thing?
Way back when yoga was created, we're talking thousands of years ago, they probably were not that different. The
Hmm.
main reason yoga was birthed was because the people who meditated wanted to be able to sit.
Mm.
So they needed to move their body before they could be able to sit. A yoga therapy, now we've got this fast paced, hot yoga,
All
some
different kinds
restorative,
of yoga.
all
Hmm.
different kinds of yoga,
Hmm.
fast, slow, restorative. There's yoga nidra, which is more of going into a deep sleep resting, but also helps get into the emotional layers. And so yoga therapy is usually trying to help somebody with some type of condition.
Hmm.
Now, from an Ayurvedic standpoint, which is the sister science to yoga,
Hmm.
They look more at Ayurveda doesn't call it a condition like necessarily MS. It's more about the way the body's presenting, and it's based on the elements in the earth, like earth, water, air, fire, space. So a little bit different. We won't get too much in that, but when you talk about balance, so Ayurveda is actually all about what's not in balance. Like, let's say you could understand this one, right? What if you have too much fire in you? So if you have too much fire, you're going to burn from an Ayurvedic standpoint. So you want to have more cooling foods, or you want more cooling practice, or people with MS, very often their symptoms are exacerbated by heat. So we want to change the practice based on that. And really, Ayurveda is about lifestyle. So changing your lifestyle as opposed to just what happens on the mat.
Right. I love that, because I think it's so important. And one of the things that I really try to emphasize is the importance of empowerment and people knowing what they can do to help themselves. Because oftentimes with MS, people do feel helpless in some sense because it's so unpredictable, and want tools and things that they can do to help themselves to improve, their health mentally, physically, etc. And I think that yoga is an extremely useful and amazing tool to help do that. And the benefits are not just physical, but also there are mental and emotional benefits. But before we get into that, so how do we know? So, I have a lot of people who, got diagnosed with MS, and they may have had problems. And one of the common things people say is, oh, I thought I was just clumsy because I was tripping, right? So how do you know that you've gotten to the point where you have a problem and you need to do something about it? Or should we look at it more like do something about it before you have a problem? And what are kind of the pros of cons and cons of approaching it that way?
So from a yogic perspective, if we do practice as a routine, then we know when the body's off, because we're tuning inward.
Right.
And so the messages come through probably clearer and quicker from that. And we may stave some of it off. I don't think is it a cure for the disease? No way.
Right.
But we become more aware of what's going on in our body. That's that proprioception you were talking about. And so we are aware of what's in the body and what's outside of the body. And I think that I've seen people tell me that I've seen it, and they've told me that they have been able to prevent, the ataxia or the weakness from focusing on it, rather than, because when we look at anxiety, or you think something's wrong, so the tendency is push it away, right? I'm not going to deal with that now. Push it away, get it out of here. But with yoga, and you're sitting on your mat, and it's just you and the mat.
Right.
So it's knocking at your door. But then you can do something about it, because you are empowered. You have these tools your toolbox is filled.
Yeah. And I think that, that is extremely important. And one of the things that, I've been looking into myself is this concept of what we call prehabilitation, right? I'm sure you may have heard of that, right? So when people get ready for surgeries, let's say if somebody's getting ready to have a knee surgery or some type of orthopedic surgery, a shoulder or something, basically they want you in the best condition possible before you have that procedure, right? So you're trying to work out to the best of your ability, build that muscle mass, etc., so that when you reach that point where you have that insult or that trauma that happens, you're in better condition so that hopefully you won't fall down as far, or it'll be easier for you to bounce back up. And so that's one of the ways that I look at, doing things proactively, like doing yoga programs, etc., before you get into trouble, because we want you to be functioning as best you can, so that if you do encounter, an issue, you already kind of have some of those tools, as you said, in your toolbox to be able to combat that. What are your thoughts about that?
I think that the more tools, we have, and with yoga, you can build different, neuroplasticity, right? Those neural
Mhm.
pathways. And because there's so many poses and we can vary them in so many different ways, you're really preparing your body.
Mhm.
I know that if I start my day, it's kind of like prevention, right? Starting the day with the routine of the meditation or a breathing practice, because there are these different levels of practice. Some people's yoga practice looks like breathing. Some people's yoga practice looks like meditation. Some people's yoga practice looks like active yoga poses, and some looks like restorative or a mixture of any of those. So
Mhm.
we have all these different tools, and variety I think is best. Now,
Mhm.
from an Ayurvedic standpoint, I always go back to that because it gives me this sense of how do I organize my life? So if you know what we say is opposites. So, if you know that you're having weakness, of course, intuitively you want to practice some strengthening poses.
Mhm.
But it's but what Ayurveda says is usually it's the likes that attract, right? So, oh, I'm really flexible, so I'm going to go for all those poses where I do the splits, whatever. But that's not necessarily what the body needs,
Mm.
right? So the body might, like, I tend to be a little bit hypermobile. So really my focus should be on alignment and strengthening.
Right. Right.
Stretching isn't what I need as much as I love it, but we
Mhm.
kind of go for what, it's kind of like attracts like. So
Right.
instead, that whole, like, if you look at the yin and yang
Mhm.
symbol, right? Like
Right.
that's the balancing act.
Yeah. So, so really, sometimes the things that we may be attracted to, for instance, I used to work out a lot in the gym and I liked the way my legs look. So I spent all my time on my legs, but I really probably need to be working on my arms a little bit more. So
Right,
I
you go for what,
definitely can
yeah.
identify with that. And so how does one know what they need to be doing, or how does a person know where to start? Right. So let's say we have someone who's like, my balance is off. I'm having some difficulty. Dr. Mitzi told me, go do some yoga, right?
Yeah,
How do
yeah,
we know we're doing the right
yeah.
thing? How do people get started?
So finding a great teacher,
Mhm.
near you. We do what Yoga Moves MS has several online practices. I sometimes teach privately. A lot of people come for the small group classes. So having somebody who's really good at that assessment from a yoga therapist, that's ideal, is to have
Mhm.
the yoga therapy assessment. But a lot of people either can't afford that, are a little scared of it. So they could dip their toes in the water for perhaps with a chair yoga class and then
Mhm.
see how that is for them. And if it's too hard, they can back off to, we have like an intro to yoga class. And sometimes that's a great way to go. And if it's too easy or they prefer to be on the floor, then we go for that modification. If you go into a mainstream yoga class and you're already feeling imbalanced, that could really throw you. You know,
Mhm.
I have people who come to me who've been prior yogis and still feel, thrown off by how they're going to do it. And so I'm always on a crusade to say, the anxiety is there. I
Mhm.
know it's there because I've been teaching yoga for MS for 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And that flyer has been in doctor's office way before COVID and before we could send everything out through email. And people would tell me it sat in their desk drawer because they were afraid to go.
Mm.
So part of it is, how do you get started? You asked? Do it.
Right.
Find a good teacher, feel confident about it, that you're in a safe place.
Right. And I think that, it's so important what you said, right? Is that you have to start somewhere. One of the things that I really try to emphasize, especially, about yoga, is that there's a level for everyone, right? I remember my first yoga class, 15 years ago when I was living in Augusta. And at the time I moved to a new city, I didn't really have any friends. So I spent a lot of time at the gym. So I took yoga classes, I took Pilates, and I took everything, right? But really fell in love with yoga. And the thing that I love is that that there's a level for everyone, so you don't have to be intimidated, because you don't have to be able to stand on your head or, twist your leg around and do a split. You don't have to be able to do that from the beginning or to have a successful practice, but you do have to take that first step and start somewhere.
You absolutely do. And, part of the practice is like the worry is, what if I can't do that?
Mm-hmm.
But actually, it's part of the practice. You realize that as you start to practice, you go, oh, so I could try it this way. I could do it that way. Nope, my body's telling me I should back off from this now. And that's true too. I had an injury and I have this hypermobile shoulder, and I really wanted to do handstand. But the practice for me was no handstand.
Right.
That's probably not a great example, but we have to acknowledge, an injury and work with it. And you can go in a class and do part of the class and not all of the class. A lot of people always say, go down to child pose, go into a resting pose, take a break. As long as you're breathing, you're doing yoga. And the breath, really, we haven't talked about that yet, but the breath is an indicator of how balanced we're feeling. So if we've got
Tell me a little bit more about that.
So let's just say we got hyperventilating going, like we're barely exhaling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or holding breath. Well, surely that is going to throw our balance off.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have an even inhale and an even exhale, that's more of we're going to feel more in balance. And so the breath practice alone can change the way we feel. We almost always start the class, and that's where you could start with the breathing practice. And let's say your inhale is longer than your exhale. Like sometimes it's holding the breath and there's barely any exhale. So we, over time, try to get those even. And it just kind of happens as a body. It's not like you have to force this to happen. The body's got this intuitive power too. So you start focusing on your breath and the body starts to even out very often, just by focusing on it. People love the invitation to focus on their breath. And I find, not everybody wants to close their eyes right away, because that's nice too. I find that many people do, but they love the invitation to, we live in such a busy world, to find an anchor with the breath. But then other people are afraid, right? So we got that other, they're afraid because they're afraid they're going to lose their focus.
So let's talk about that. Yeah.
So
So let's talk about that, right? That focusing on the breath. One of the benefits of yoga that I talk to my patients about very frequently is, focusing on that breath really allows us to quiet the mind, right? And if you're trying to balance, as you said, it's very difficult to balance when our mind is all over the place and when, we've got all these other things going on. And as we begin to focus on that breath, we begin to feel more balanced. So, I think that that's an extremely important point, because, the benefits are not just physical, but also mental, right? And you touched on anxiety a little bit earlier, but let's talk about that and how yoga helps with that.
So yoga is like a balancing act, right? So when first of all, I think from a physical level, when there's anxiety, helping the body move, if we're in a tight, contracted position from anxiety, which many of us are right now. So opening up and letting that energy kind of lengthen out or vacate, right? I have a teacher who has a spinal cord injury, and he's a very advanced yoga teacher, and he says, let it out. So he has a lot of spasticity. So the first thing he does in the morning is like, let it out, So I think that, and he's really, he was one of the first people who taught me about rooting down. When someone's anxious, they can get very helter-skelter up towards the brain area. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
but
Absolutely.
they don't feel grounded down in their feet. And
Mm-hmm.
I know people say, oh, but I'm numb. I can't feel my feet. And you know what his answer is? You do have a sensation. So he's got an injury. I think it's from like let's say T4, T5. So he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't
Mm-hmm.
feel.
Right. So that's the thoracic spine, the middle spine, which controls things from basically that waist area, a little bit above the waist area down to the lower extremities, to the
Yes.
legs.
So he had to find a way to find a base for his body, which he considers the spine and the sitting bones. And so, but it's also, it is the spot, for him, it is rooting down through the sitting bones in a chair.
Mm-hmm.
And he will take his hands and press them into his thighs, which has, if you're seated and you push your hands down into your thighs and your feet are touching down to the earth, that helps you to root and press down, because there's
Mm-hmm.
all this helter-skelter energy in our world with,
Mm-hmm.
and especially when the anxiety it's energy that's all over.
Right.
So it brings it more into control,
Right.
alignment.
Right.
And that is something that the poses, almost every pose, whether it's seated mountain pose, the basic pose, which is seated in a chair with your feet on the earth, or standing, we start by rooting down the feet with all
Mm-hmm.
those different receptors at the bottom of the feet and traveling
Mm-hmm.
up the ankles and the hips and the neck. And but that's where it starts. So we've got an even breath and we're feeling sensation in our body, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
because numbness is a sensation.
Right.
So we've got the anchor in the breath. That's one of our tools, a very, very, very important tool. And
Mm-hmm.
then we've got the anchor in sensation in the body. And that's how we get this whole mind, body, spirit connection that perhaps differs from other types of exercise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. And I think that, as you're talking about being rooted and grounded, again, kind of being aware of the sensations in our body is extremely important, right? I think about it when I first started practicing yoga 15 years ago. I remember my first class. The teacher kept telling me to take my shoulders out of my ears, right? And so I'm sitting there and she's like, "Put your shoulders down." And I'm like, "Okay." And then she would come back by and whisper again, "Put your shoulders down." And I'd be like, "Okay." But I didn't realize that I was walking around like this all the time,
Yeah,
right? And so, being aware of where your body is in space, right? The benefits are not just while you're doing that practice, but throughout the day, right? As you're aware of where you're on space, I can now say, oh my God, why are my shoulders up in my ears, right? I can do
right.
that even if I'm not doing yoga at the time. So when you have that consistent practice, it benefits you, throughout, other aspects of your life, even when you're not doing it right at that
You
moment.
realize your shoulders are at your,
I know. I was
you
like, oh my
become more
God.
aware of it, and then you can drop them down. And
Exactly.
sometimes there all this contractions going on. Almost all of us have, tension going on in the trap area and the neck area. Whenever I ask students, where do you want me to focus? It's so often the shoulder and the neck area.
Right, right.
Um, and so we call yoga an internal massage. Like you can go have
Mm.
someone do it to you, which is awesome. And I think
Yes.
that's very therapeutic, right?
Mhm.
It's awesome. But yoga is an internal body massage that you can do for yourself.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
Yeah,
Now,
taking your shoulders up and back and around, right? That feels good.
it does. It does. Now, let's go back to something that we were talking about before we started the show, right? So we talked about proprioception, right? Which is kind of feeling where our bodies are in space. But you used another term that I found very fascinating called introception. Tell us a
Right.
little bit about
Right.
that.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm not sure who coined this word, but I have definitely seen it in the yoga therapy journals.
Mhm.
And it's the awareness from inside.
Mm.
So, I find even like they could be an excellent athlete, at a sport, but not, and of course they're going to have that awareness with whatever they do. But when you take it into another environment, they may not be so aware. Plus, so we've got this space around us, and you're like, what do you mean the space around me? But where is your body in that space?
Right.
What happens if you put your arm up over your head or you take it out to the side? How do you feel different? What if one arm is up and one arm is down? Now, how does that feel outside? But how does it feel inside?
Mm.
Inside, what's going on inside? What do you feel?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so
Yeah.
then you can really start to get into those nuances of, as you practice this, you start to notice and have a little bit more of familiarity with different muscle groups and how to move the body. And when we move, how does it hurt, right? People get carpal tunnel from sitting at the desk, right? That's one way they get it. And I mean, there's many different ways to get it, but the idea is that you don't notice it till you go to the doctor and they say, you say, my wrist is hurting. I don't know why. So we become more conscious of how we're holding our hands on the keyboard. So this is a more proactive way to become aware of which repetitive movements perhaps are causing some type of injury. And I also think of it as developing different neural pathways, because when we become more familiar with what's going on in the body in different poses, like if you're doing a big wide pose, like a triangle pose where the arms and the legs are wide and you're taking up space. So you're taking up space around you, like take it up, own it, right? Feel it.
Yeah.
And notice perhaps, is my weight, in an asymmetrical pose. So asymmetrical could be just one arm's up and one arm is down, right? So something where one side of the body's doing one thing and the other side's doing something else. You can become aware of the side's feeling a little bit heavier, the side's feeling a little bit lighter. This side feels like I'm rolling out on my foot, or I'm rolling in, or it feels like my ankle's gonna buckle. Or you become because yoga is focusing on the whole body, you become aware the bottom of your feet all the way up. A good practice, and it could just be a few poses, tunes you into the whole body. So that interoception is woken up. You're waking it up. A lot of people we don't, including me, we all have habit patterns.
Yes.
But when we have a practice like this, we become so much more aware of it. Like, oh, this chair is kind of low for me, or it needs more of a cushion to lift my hips up.
Yeah.
So my spine is taller. We become more aware of our posture.
Yeah. I have horrible posture. I'm working on it, but
when that word is like you say posture and people they look down like, oh, I don't want to talk about
that. Until my back starts hurting. Then I'm like, maybe I need to talk about posture. Yeah. But I mean, I love that, right? So that awareness, right? Awareness of where you are in space, awareness how different movements affect your body, and one of the things that I think is extremely important, again, when we're talking about MS, we talk a lot about adjustment, right? So, we talk a lot about adjusting to new normals, but something that I also talk about is the fact that, our society kind of has this thought of no pain, no gain. You keep going till you pass out.
Yeah.
But if you do that with MS, you pay for it on the back end, right? So that awareness can also help you so that you won't just keep ignoring whatever that sensation is until it gets to a point where you're really in trouble.
They're knocking on your door like, that's it.
Exactly. It's like, sit down, stop it. Whatever you're doing, stop doing that and do something else. Yeah. So I think that that's so extremely, vital and important, to living well, with this condition. What are some?
Know
Go
when
ahead.
it's causing,
No, no, no. Go ahead.
We have to, in order for the no pain all gain,
Mm-hmm.
we have to know what's causing the pain. And very often we turn that off and we don't want to pay attention to it.
Right.
And so that's what this practice does. It says, oh, that's happening. And oh, if I adapt that, I'm not in pain anymore. So it can help alleviate or lessen some of the pain or prevent it from even happening.
Right. So we know that yoga definitely is a benefit for imbalance, right? And then certainly people also can do things like traditional physical therapy in addition to yoga or other
They
exercises.
are sister sciences. I really
Yeah.
feel that the OTs, the PTs, we are on the same wavelength. Our approaches, our training maybe is it, well, it's different, right? You know, like a yoga therapist is usually looking at the whole body. Like one of the first things I do in a yoga therapy assessment is have them sit or stand, you know, in mountain pose. You can get a lot out of that right there. We could spend hours on that.
In mountain pose. Yeah, I will. That might be a little tough.
Static, you know? And a PT is going to come at it from much more specific, usually much more specific standpoint. If I was doing a yoga therapeutic, I probably still wouldn't get as specific as the PT.
So, what other symptoms can yoga help? So, we talked about imbalance. What other symptoms can be helped or improved with a yoga practice, a regular yoga practice?
Well, I'm going to talk from my students' perspective because they know best, right? So they tell me that fatigue, you know, it really helps fatigue. You know how like it's really hard, right? You're feeling fatigued and getting on the mat or doing the practice is tough. But there's always a change in people's faces around a quarter or halfway through the class. It's like you wake up, right? Wake up, waking up. In fact, that's the name of my teacher's book. It's called Waking, you know, waking. And that's what we're doing. And people tell me they sleep better, their fatigue is better. It does help spasticity. And the more you do it, of course, the more it's going to help. Again, it won't alleviate it totally. But if we go for that whole prevention, like I'm not spastic now, but if we keep our flexibility, it's not like it all happens in one day.
Right.
They say at about a year of a practice, you might, you know, get to a certain range. But it takes time to reach that, you know, and your body changes. So what was good a year ago, you know, the body is always changing and we're meeting the body where it's at.
Right.
That's part of it. So empowerment is huge. It is strengthening. People think of it as just stretching, but it's strengthening. And there are so many different poses that can get at that, including mountain pose. And the breathing helps with the strengthening, especially that exhale is so key to core strengthening. And the concentration and focus for people who feel brain fog.
Yes.
They feel more clarity.
Absolutely.
There's something, you know, when I first started yoga therapy, it was so fresh. We didn't have studies, and we have a lot more studies now on yoga and meditation, but we still don't know what that magic is about yoga, where people get that yoga glow, you know, where's that coming from? And so I really think it is marrying this together, the breath, movement, and some people like chanting, and that actually is part of a yoga practice as well.
Absolutely. And I see a comment that I'd like for you to address. And it says, fatigue is so hard and it feels counterintuitive to move to help fatigue. And I hear that a lot from my patients, right? And you briefly touched on that, but a lot of people say, I'm too tired to move, and moving is going to make me more tired. So how does it help improve fatigue?
Well, not moving is going to make you more tired too, right?
Absolutely.
So I think one of the big things is the breath alone, because if that breath is not a rich breath, and and by the way, I would say 50-60% or more people do not breathe optimally.
Mm.
That I'm not pulling that out of a hat. I actually
Wow.
might be underestimating that we about 50% of people mouth breathe.
Mm. Wow.
So that will cause fatigue. I know that might not be the answer they were looking for,
Mm-hmm.
but breathing an optimal breath through the nose, a deep breath or a low breath, the belly breathing, that alone can change our energy level.
Mm.
Movement is medicine. I used to stay away from that, but since I'm talking to you, I figure,
Yes. We talk about medicine, so we talk about, approved medications, but we
yes,
also talk about movement and music and other types of medicine. So
yes.
definitely,
Yes. So, you mentioned music, putting something on. The chanting could be a way to start. The breathing could be a way to start. I think sometimes what's fatiguing is talking ourselves into actually doing it.
mm-hmm.
So just, and if the fatigue is overwhelming, how about one or two poses and
Mm-hmm.
start there? Like,
Yeah.
this doesn't have to be big. Sometimes just taking your arms, now they might not fully go up over your head, but to your range of motion, that alone can change how you feel, just taking your arms up over your head.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
We
You
can
know,
change our energy level. Let's say somebody's feeling really anxious. We were
mhm.
talking about that earlier. So that might be more of a restorative pose, or very often a forward fold. So flexion, where the torso and the spine are coming towards the legs.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
that will be more calming for the nervous system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so many amazing benefits. So, in thinking, because we are getting close to our time here, we've been having a
It goes
really,
so
I
fast.
know, rich discussion. So, how does someone get started? Okay, Mindy, all right. I live in South Dakota, and
I got someone from Iran today. I just have to
oh
say that.
wow! Well, we've
Yeah,
got somebody from Toronto on the show,
that's great.
who's tuning in, but not quite as far as Iran.
Yeah, we
Um,
had London earlier today. That was
nice.
amazing.
Nice, nice. So how do they practically get started, right? So what are some resources for someone who says, "Okay, this sounds really interesting. I don't know where to start." How do they get started with a yoga
I
practice?
think so. What they need to know is they don't have to have anything fancy. If they're going to start with chair yoga, then a basic folding chair that's sturdy, that's not going to fall, right?
Right.
It is really nice. Sorry.
That's okay.
It's really nice to have a sticky yoga mat,
hmm
um, because that will help some stability.
And
And
you can get those anywhere, like
anywhere,
Walmart,
anywhere.
Amazon, all over the
Absolutely.
place.
You can buy them for $10 or $20,
hmm
and that is an awesome, you don't have to have a fancy yoga mat. Other than that, the props can be really found around your house. You don't have to buy anything fancy. If there's any concern about ambulation, like we said, if someone is using a cane or a walker, I would definitely start in the chair. Now, I
hmm
do have some people who prefer to be down on the mat and do not want to be in the chair. And by the way, that's part of this whole balance thing, right? Like
hmm
being empowered to get up and down. But you only want to do that if you have assistance nearby, if you've got everything set up so it's really safe, the chair against the wall, you know that you never go down unless you know you can get up with help.
Right. Right.
But so they can contact someone like me. There are different organizations around who offer adaptive yoga for MS, and we have intro sessions. So that's a great place to start. Meeting with a yoga therapist is an awesome way. Even just one time to kind of get that confidence going is a
hmm
great way to start. Um, we are going to have up super, super soon, like I'm hoping next month, is an on-demand system.
Oh,
where
nice.
they'll be able to take. So we are getting people from around the world, and sometimes it works out that the timing is good and sometimes it doesn't. So that's why we started the on demand, so people can pick a class, and there will be ones that are just for beginners, and they can play around a little bit and test as long as they commit to stay within safe realms. And I think it's great to always ask your doctor, like, what do you think, what should I do, or what should I, probably more like, what shouldn't I do? And then we can work,
Absolutely.
yeah, and then work from
Absolutely.
there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So those are all great points, right? So, very minimal props, right? You can find things around your house. I've got yoga blocks and I've got blankets, but sometimes I'll get a
Well, right,
towel or a
right. A
blanket.
towel works, a blanket
Hmm.
works, sometimes pillows work, a a bathrobe, the belt to it. One
Hmm.
that we've started using a lot is leg lifters. So people use a leg lifter. We use that to help stretch. I
Hmm.
honestly think the cane is one of the best props.
Hmm.
There's You can use a cane to do a side bend, lifting the cane up over your head. You can use you can stretch your foot with it, flex the toes towards you
Hmm.
with it, get the little handle around there. There's some amazing things we can do with
Yeah.
the cane. So,
Yeah.
and if you don't have a block, you might use one of those exercise balls and squeeze it. And then, of course, during COVID, people started using toilet paper rolls instead of the block between
Smart.
the thighs. So that
Smart.
works too.
Smart. Listen, we learned all kinds of hacks during COVID, didn't we?
We sure did.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. So you don't need a lot of equipment. Certainly there are resources. Now, how would someone find out about yoga therapists in their area? Is there
Yes.
a place where
So
people can
it's
look?
called the International Association of Yoga Therapy.
Mhm.
And so you can look up by region.
Okay. Okay.
And if
Awesome.
they can't, they can actually contact me and I'll get them in touch with someone. Accessible Yoga is another organization that
Mhm.
has been um, keeping a kind of a storehouse of people who
Okay.
work with adaptive yoga or accessible yoga. So that's
Awesome.
another great way to do it. The small group classes have been awesome, and we haven't gotten back together yet. That COVID strain has still been going around a bit where people aren't quite ready to be in the room yet together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but the small group classes are awesome
Mhm.
because talk about balance. It's the balance of the people in the room,
Yeah.
like cheering each other on,
Yeah.
right? And then making suggestions about how they might improve balance because this is what they do, you know? Like,
Mhm.
meaning they make a suggestion. And I think, like, I am a facilitator.
Yeah.
Every idea, almost every idea is come from a student, all
Mhm.
these creative ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love it. Well, we could sit on here and talk about it for another 2 hours, but there
I
is
know.
a time limit, unfortunately. So what last tips or what tips would you give someone who may be on the fence or may be scared to start a yoga program? What tips or what advice would you give them?
I would say, and I have some people say to me, "Is it okay if I just watch?"
Mhm.
Which is fine.
Mhm.
Come watch. Come watch. Just try, and maybe not think about it so much, but just dip your toes in.
Yeah.
Dip your toes in. And I don't think you'll be sorry. You could start with just learning regular breathing. You could learn what's called alternate nostril breath, and there's a lot on there on YouTube about alternate nostril breath to balance out. Just even developing a little bit of a routine for your day, starting out by breathing before you get out of bed, like take 10 breaths and just watch those breaths and
Mhm.
feel them and tune in before you even step out of bed would be a great way to do it.
Mhm.
Or, put your feet up the wall. So in bed, if your bed is against a wall, or put your feet up on the chair, or put your feet up on a stack of pillows in bed and feel just the restorative of your feet going up. Um,
Mhm.
because what we're trying to do is actually turn ourselves kind of upside down and sideways in yoga. So just try some. Who was it who said try something you are scared of every day? Was that Eleanor Roosevelt who said?
It may have been.
Is try something you're scared of every day. And
Mm-hmm.
I always tell my kids, and like, let's get rid of the word try. Let's just do it. Let's just do one pose. How about one stretch? See how it feels. See how it feels. If you feel pain, let it go a little bit. Release it. Go back in, but do it the next time, maybe 50% or even 25%, and then inch up, because it is no pain, all gain. Just know this should feel good.
Right.
And if they go to a place where they don't feel good afterwards, they're in the wrong place.
In the wrong place. I love that. I love that. I love it. So tell everyone where to find you and your amazing yoga programs, Mindy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So yogamovesms.org is where they can find me. And we do have a great team of teachers, and they can email me. I am always open to emailing, or they can message me on Facebook, of course, or Instagram. And it's Mindy, MINDY, at yogamovesms.org. I do have these like adaptive yoga cards in the book. So if someone is more, that would be where they could start too. But I don't suggest it. There are people though, who are really want to see the pictures and they want to read the instructions before doing it. So if that's the kind of learner that you are, I kind of was that way too, like to grasp something. I had to know everything about it before I felt like I knew anything.
Yeah.
That's a possibility, but we just look at, something simple. These adaptive yoga cards can be a way too. And they're on my website, but really I think the best place to start is with a foundations class. And we call it Ask the Yogi. Like, come and just ask questions. Like, make yourself more comfortable. So Mindy at Yoga Moves MS. They can text me. My number's on the site. I'm very easy to get a hold of.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for taking your time and sharing your expertise. And I know that so many people have gotten lots of things. I see the comments populating that people are, loving the information. And thank you so much for coming to spend time with me on Brain Chat.
Thank you so much. I mean, so namaste. This is actually like a hand mudra. We didn't talk about hand mudras, but one of the benefits of namaste and putting your palms together is to balance out the right and left hemispheres of the brain.
I love it.
What better way, right? Like, this is yoga. Breathe and put your palms together. So I really, really honor and appreciate you, Dr. Mitzi. You are amazing. You call yourself the nerdy neurologist, but I am honored that you asked me to be on here and that we could share the benefits of yoga together.
Absolutely. It is my pleasure as well. All right. Namaste, everyone.
Namaste.
We will see you in 2 weeks. Same bat time, same bat channel. Have a great night, everyone.
Bye-bye.